In the halls of Tesla headquarters, where humanity's greatest ambitions were forged, a dying girl's final wish was about to redefine one man's journey. Maya stormed into Elon's office, her grip tight on a tablet that seemed too heavy for its size. Her face was pale, her voice trembling with urgency. "Elon," she began, the words breaking through the room's stillness. Without looking up from the Mars schematics, Elon replied coldly, "If it's not about Mars, it can wait." Maya stepped closer, her voice sharp and unyielding. "It's about a young girl, and her last dream rests with you. Before we dive into this story, don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell to stay updated with our latest stories. Now, let's get started." Maya placed the tablet on Elon's desk with trembling hands. "You need to see this," she said quietly, her tone heavy with meaning. Elon hesitated but tapped the screen. The video began. On the screen was a young girl lying in a hospital bed, her head wrapped in a bright pink scarf. Despite the pale complexion and visible frailty, her eyes sparkled with determination. Her voice, soft but unwavering, filled the room. "Hi, Mr. Musk. My name is Sophie, and I'm 9 years old. My dream is to go to Mars someday. But the doctors say I won't live long enough to see it happen. That's okay, I just have one wish. I want to meet you, even if it's just for one hug." The video froze on her smiling face, a bittersweet image that seemed to hang in the air. Elon leaned back in his chair, his gaze fixed on the screen. For a moment he didn't speak. "Is this real?" he asked finally, his voice quieter than usual. Maya nodded. "Her mother sent it through a charity foundation. Sophie has terminal cancer. She doesn't have much time." Elon sat motionless, the weight of the moment pressing down on him. "How soon can we make this happen?" he asked, his tone resolute. The car moved silently through the dimly lit streets, but Elon's thoughts were anything but quiet. He stared out of the window, his reflection faintly visible against the dark glass. Sophie's voice played on repeat in his mind, her words striking a chord deeper than he'd expected. "I want to meet you, even if it's just for one hug." Elon clenched his hands tightly, his gaze fixed on the blurred city lights. For years, people had called him a hero, a visionary. But tonight those titles felt hollow. How could he possibly live up to what Sophie believed about him? Maya, sitting in the front seat, broke the silence. "You're doing the right thing," she said softly, as if sensing his unease. Elon didn't respond immediately. Instead, his thoughts spiraled. He had built rockets, envisioned cities on Mars, and revolutionized industries, but this was different. This wasn't about technology or ambition, it was about being human. He finally replied, his voice low, almost to himself. "What if I disappoint her?" Maya turned slightly, her tone steady yet empathetic. "You won't. She's not asking for perfection, Elon. She's asking for you." Elon let those words linger, the gravity of them sinking in as the car approached the private airstrip. The steady hum of the jet engines filled the cabin, but Elon couldn't find peace in the rhythmic sound. He stood near the window, staring into the endless blackness of the night sky. His thoughts churned like storm clouds, tangled with doubt and unease. Maya sat nearby, scrolling through her tablet, though her focus was elsewhere. Finally, she broke the silence. "You know, Sophie doesn't need you to be perfect," she said softly, her eyes lifting to meet his. Elon turned to her, his expression unreadable. "It's not about being perfect. It's about being enough. To her, I'm not just Elon Musk, I'm the man who made Mars possible. What if I can't live up to that?" Maya set her tablet aside and leaned forward, her voice steady. "Do you really think Sophie cares about Mars right now? She's not asking for the visionary or the billionaire. She's asking for the man behind it all, the one who dared to dream big." Elon ran a hand through his hair, exhaling slowly. Her words lingered, both reassuring and unsettling. He leaned back into his seat but didn't relax. "Dreaming big," he murmured. "That's what this is all about, isn't it? Hers. Mine. Ours." Maya nodded, her voice gentler now. And sometimes, showing up is the biggest dream you can fulfill. As the jet began its descent, Elon's reflection shimmered in the window, a man torn between his towering legacy and the simple act of being present. The hospital loomed ahead, its fluorescent lights flickering faintly against the pre-dawn sky. Elon stepped out of the car, the cool air biting against his skin, but his focus was elsewhere. Maya walked a step behind him, her tablet clutched tightly to her chest, her expression a mix of determination and nerves. Inside, the sterile quiet of the pediatric oncology ward wrapped around them. A nurse led the way through the hallways, her voice hushed. "She's been so excited," the nurse said with a small smile, her eyes flickering to Elon. "She talks about this moment all the time." As they approached the room, Elon's pace slowed. The door was adorned with hand-drawn pictures, rockets, planets, and a wobbly but charming SpaceX logo. A colorful sign read, "Sophie's Space Adventures." Maya touched his arm gently. "She's been waiting for this," she whispered. Elon hesitated for a moment, his hand hovering over the door handle. Then, he took a deep breath and pushed it open. The room was small but vibrant, filled with posters of constellations and Mars missions. In the center, Sophie sat up in bed, her frail frame propped by pillows. Her pink scarf glowed under the soft light, and her face lit up the moment she saw him. "Mr. Musk!" she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with awe. Elon stepped closer, his towering frame contrasting with Sophie's frail figure. Yet in her eyes, he wasn't just a man, he was a hero. "You must be Sophie," Elon said gently, kneeling beside her bed. A small smile tugged at the corner of his lips. "I've heard you're a big fan of Mars." Sophie nodded enthusiastically, her weak arms lifting slightly as she mimed floating. "I've been practicing for zero gravity," she whispered, her voice a faint echo of her energy. "Do you think I'd make a good astronaut?" Elon chuckled softly, the tension in his shoulders easing. "I think you'd be one of the best. But astronauts have to promise to train hard." With every ounce of determination, Sophie held out her pinky. "Deal," she said, her eyes gleaming. For a moment, Elon hesitated, his throat tightening. Then, swallowing hard, he linked his pinky with hers. "Deal." The room seemed to brighten with her laughter, a sound weak but pure. She reached for a notebook on her bedside table, its cover boldly labeled Starlight Journal. "I've been planning my Mars mission," she said, flipping through pages filled with wobbly but detailed drawings of rockets and planets. Elon traced the lines with his finger, his voice thick with emotion. "You've thought of everything," he said softly. "You'd be an amazing mission commander." Sophie held the Starlight Journal close to her chest for a moment, as if gathering the courage to let it go. Her small hands trembled slightly as she extended it toward Elon. "This is for you," she said, her voice soft but deliberate. "I've been working on it for so long. It has all my plans for Mars." Elon took the notebook gently, almost reverently, his fingers brushing over the bold, uneven lettering on the cover. He opened it slowly, his eyes scanning the pages filled with shaky but detailed sketches of rockets, habitats, and even a self-portrait of Sophie in a spacesuit. "You even included a rover," he said, his voice thick with emotion. Sophie nodded eagerly. "I wanted it to be ready for when I could go. But since I can't..." Her voice faltered for a moment, her gaze dropping to her blanket. "I want you to take it. Maybe it can still go to Mars. A part of me can." Elon swallowed hard, his throat tightening as her words hung in the air. He looked up at her, his voice steady but heavy with meaning. "I promise, Sophie. Your dream will reach Mars. One way or another." Her smile returned, faint but radiant. "Really? Really?" Elon said firmly, his eyes locking with hers. For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the machines. Then Sophie laughed, a small, fleeting sound that filled the space with warmth. "It's not just for me," she added. "It's for everyone who wants to believe in something bigger." Elon nodded, closing the notebook gently. "Then it's going to Mars," he said, the weight of her dream now firmly in his hands. As their conversation slowed, Sophie's mother appeared in the doorway. Her eyes were tired but kind, and her hands trembled slightly as she held out a small envelope. "She wanted you to have this," her mother said softly, her voice cracking under the weight of the moment. Elon stood, taking the envelope with both hands as if it were made of glass. He looked at Sophie, whose gaze had softened. "What is it?" he asked gently. Sophie's smile was faint, but her voice carried a surprising strength. "It's my letter for you. I started it when I first sent the video. I didn't know if you'd ever see it, but I wrote it anyway." Elon's hands tightened around the envelope, the reality of her words settling into him. He glanced at her mother, who gave him a small nod of encouragement. Slowly, he opened the envelope, careful not to tear its delicate folds. Inside, the letter was written in Sophie's uneven but careful handwriting. Every word seemed to echo with the depth of her feelings. "Dear Mr. Musk, thank you for making my dream come true. Meeting you is the best day of my life. When you go to Mars, please take a piece of me with you. Even if I can't go, I want to be part of the journey. Love, Sophie." Elon blinked hard, his vision blurring. He folded the letter carefully and placed it in his pocket. "Sophie," he said, his voice steady but thick with emotion. "I promise. I'll take you to Mars." Her smile brightened slightly, her pale cheeks flushing faintly. "Then I guess I really will be an astronaut," she whispered, her tone filled with quiet pride. The hospital room felt different that morning. The air was heavier, quieter, as if time itself had slowed. Elon returned, his steps purposeful but subdued. Sophie was propped up in bed, her pink scarf slightly askew, her breathing softer, more labored than the day before. "Hi, Commander Sophie," Elon greeted her gently, his voice steady despite the knot tightening in his chest. Sophie's face lit up weakly, her lips curving into a small smile. "Hi, Mr. Musk. Did you bring the mission log?" With a soft chuckle, Elon held up the Starlight Journal. "I did. Though I had to wrestle it away from Maya," he teased, hoping to bring some levity. Sophie giggled faintly, the sound fragile but genuine. "Good. Every astronaut needs their mission log." Her gaze shifted to the window, where morning sunlight filtered through the curtains, casting a golden glow. "Do you think Mars looks like that?" Elon pulled a chair closer to her bed, his tone gentle. "Mars is colder, redder. But it's beautiful in its own way. Full of possibilities, just like your dreams, Sophie." She hesitated, then reached under her pillow and pulled out a small folded paper star. Its edges were uneven, its creases imperfect, but she held it with reverence. "This is for you," she said, her voice trembling. "It's my star. I made it so that, even if I can't go to Mars, a part of me still can." Elon accepted it carefully, his fingers brushing against its delicate folds. For a moment, he couldn't speak, his throat tight with emotion. "Sophie," he said finally, his voice steady but weighted. "I promise. I'll take this to Mars. Your dream will reach farther than any star ever has." Her eyes glimmered, her cheeks faintly flushed with a fragile warmth. "You promise?" "I promise," Elon repeated firmly, his gaze unwavering. They sat together in silence, the paper star resting lightly in his hands. Sophie broke the quiet with a faint laugh. "You know, Mr. Musk, I always thought Mars would be lonely. But now, it feels like home." Elon's lips quirked into a bittersweet smile. "That's because you make it special, Sophie. Dreams like yours bring it to life." Her mother, standing silently in the doorway, wiped her tears with trembling hands. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Sophie's voice softened as her energy waned. "Do you think people will remember me, Mr. Musk?" Elon leaned closer, his tone filled with quiet conviction. "Sophie, you've already made history. People will talk about you for generations." Her eyes fluttered shut briefly, her breath slowing. When they opened again, her voice was a faint whisper. "I'll watch from the stars." Elon stayed by her side until her breathing evened out, the folded star still in his hand. The next morning, Elon sat quietly in the hospital's waiting area, the folded paper star resting securely in his hand. He stared at it, running his fingers along the creases, his thoughts swirling with the weight of what lay ahead. Maya approached him, her footsteps soft, her expression heavy with unspoken words. "Elon," she said gently, sitting down beside him. He didn't look up, his voice subdued. "She made me promise, Maya. I have to keep it." Before Maya could respond, Sophie's mother appeared at the doorway, her face pale, her eyes rimmed with red. She hesitated for a moment, then took a trembling step forward. "She's been asking for you," she said, her voice barely audible. Elon rose immediately, following her back to Sophie's room. Inside, the atmosphere felt fragile, as if the room itself recognized the weight of the moment. Sophie lay in bed, her breath shallow, her pink scarf now neatly tied. Her mother stood quietly near the window, hands clasped tightly together. Elon approached Sophie's bedside, his heart pounding. Her eyes fluttered open, and a faint smile crossed her lips when she saw him. "Mr. Musk?" she whispered, her voice weaker than before. Elon knelt beside her, taking her hand gently. "Hi, Commander Sophie. How's the mission log coming along?" She chuckled faintly, the sound barely audible. "Almost ready for launch," she said. Then her gaze softened, and she whispered, "Did you bring my star?" Elon held it up, his voice steady. "It's right here. And it's going to Mars." Her smile brightened slightly, her eyes glistening. "Thank you," she murmured. "You kept your promise." For a moment, the room was silent except for the soft hum of the machines. Then Sophie spoke again, her voice trembling. "When you get to Mars, do you think you'll look back and see us here?" Elon's voice broke slightly as he replied. "Every time I look at the stars, I'll see you, Sophie." Her eyes closed briefly, her breathing slowing. When she opened them again, her voice was a faint whisper. "I'm ready now, to watch from the stars." Elon stayed by her side until her breathing stilled. Her mother stifled a sob, stepping forward to place her hand on Sophie's forehead one last time. Outside the hospital, the sun had begun to rise, casting a golden light over the quiet city. Elon stood by the entrance, the folded star in his hand, his gaze fixed on the horizon. He exhaled deeply, a quiet resolve settling within him. "She'll always be part of this journey," he murmured to himself, his grip tightening on the star. Back at the SpaceX headquarters, the atmosphere was charged with focus and purpose. Engineers moved quickly through the hangar, inspecting the massive rocket that would soon carry humanity's hopes, and Sophie's star, to Mars. Elon stood amidst the controlled chaos, the folded paper star tucked safely in his pocket. His expression was resolute as he addressed his team. "This isn't just another launch," he began, his voice carrying across the room. "This mission carries a dream, one that belongs to a little girl who taught me what it means to truly reach for the stars. Her star will go to Mars, not just for her, but for everyone who dares to dream big." The room fell silent for a moment, the gravity of his words settling over the team. Then, with quiet determination, they returned to their work. Elon stepped over to the rocket's payload compartment, where a small, secured container awaited. A lead engineer opened it carefully, revealing the designated spot for keepsakes and symbols of hope. Elon unfolded the star, its creases faintly worn, and placed it inside with great care. "Make sure it's safe," he said, his voice quieter now. The engineer nodded solemnly, sealing the compartment. Later, in a press conference, Elon stood before a sea of reporters. Cameras flashed as he held up a photograph of Sophie's star. "A little girl named Sophie gave me this," he said, his voice steady but filled with emotion. "She dreamed of Mars but didn't live to see it. So we're taking her with us. This mission isn't just about exploration, it's about carrying forward the dreams of those who inspire us." The room was silent for a moment before a wave of applause broke out. Elon stepped back, the image of Sophie's star still projected on the screen behind him, its fragile form now a symbol of resilience and hope. The launch pad shimmered under the midday sun, the rocket towering above like a monument to ambition and hope. Engineers and technicians buzzed around the site, making final checks, their voices crackling through headsets. In the control room, Elon stood behind a glass wall, his gaze fixed on the rocket. The folded paper star was securely inside, its presence a quiet reminder of the promise he made. Final systems check complete. All systems go. The launch director's voice echoed across the room. Elon stepped closer to the microphone, addressing the team. Today, we're not just sending a rocket to Mars. We're sending a dream that started with a little girl named Sophie. Her star will travel farther than any of us ever imagined. The countdown began. 10, 9, 8. The tension in the room was palpable, each second stretching endlessly. 3, 2, 1. The engines roared to life, flames and smoke erupting as the rocket lifted off the ground. The sound was deafening, shaking the very earth beneath them. Elon watched in silence, his reflection shimmering in the glass as the rocket disappeared into the sky. In that moment, it wasn't just a rocket, it was a promise fulfilled. Sophie's dream was on its way to Mars. Weeks passed, and the rocket continued its journey through the vast expanse of space. The mission updates streamed into the SpaceX control room, each one bringing Elon and his team closer to Mars. One early morning, the control room buzzed with anticipation as the rover's camera feed was set to go live. Engineers huddled around monitors, their faces a mixture of excitement and focus. Elon stood quietly at the back, his hands clasped behind him, the weight of the moment pressing heavily on his chest. Camera feed initiated, announced a technician, his voice breaking the tension. The screen flickered, and then there it was, Mars. The red soil stretched endlessly beneath a pale sky, rugged and untouched. Gasps rippled through the room, but Elon's focus remained unwavering. The rover's mechanical arm moved into view, and the camera panned slowly, revealing the small memorial that the team had carefully placed. Encased in a protective glass compartment was Sophie's paper star, gleaming faintly under the Martian sun. The room fell silent. The image of the star projected across the control room's massive screen seemed almost surreal. A plaque below it read, "For Sophie, who dreamed of the stars and became one of them." Elon stepped closer to the screen, his reflection visible alongside the image of the Martian landscape. His voice, low but resolute, broke the silence. "She made it." The room erupted into applause, but Elon remained still, his gaze fixed on the star. For him, this was more than a mission milestone, it was a promise fulfilled, a dream realized. At that moment, Sophie's legacy wasn't just on Mars. It was etched into the hearts of everyone who dared to believe in something greater than themselves. Years later, beneath the pale pink sky of Mars, Elon stood on the rocky terrain, his boots crunching softly against the red soil. The Martian landscape stretched endlessly before him, vast and quiet, a testament to the dreams of countless generations. Ahead of him, the small memorial gleamed under the weak sunlight. The folded paper star rested exactly as it had been placed, protected within its glass casing. The plaque below, now slightly weathered, still bore the words, "For Sophie, who dreamed of the stars and became one of them." Elon approached the memorial, pausing as his shadow fell across the star. For a moment he stood still, letting the enormity of the moment settle around him. "Sophie," he murmured, his voice barely audible in the thin Martian air. "We made it." He crouched slightly, his gloved hand brushing the glass casing. His reflection mingled with the image of the star, a quiet reminder of the promise he had kept. Looking out over the barren expanse, Elon's thoughts drifted. Sophie's story was no longer just hers, it had become a beacon of hope for millions on Earth, a reminder that even the smallest dreams could reach the stars. And so, as humanity continued its journey into the cosmos, Sophie's legacy lived on, carried by those who dared to dream of something greater. If this story touched your heart, share it with someone who believes in the power of dreams. And don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories that remind us of the beauty of hope, resilience, and the human spirit.